The sun struggled to pierce the heavy gray clouds hanging over Oakridge. Winter had descended early this year, blanketing the small town in pristine white snow that muffled every sound except the occasional scrape of shovels against sidewalks. It was the kind of morning that kept most people indoors, wrapped in blankets with steaming mugs clutched between cold fingers. Michael Sullivan stood on his second-floor apartment balcony despite the cold, his military habits still dictating his morning routine even 8 years after retirement. Steam rose from the black coffee in his weathered hands as he surveyed the quiet street below. At 58, his frame remained solid despite the years, though silver had long since claimed his once dark hair. The lines around his eyes spoke of both laughter and sorrow, though recently more of the latter. The digital clock on his phone displayed 6:57 a.m., 3 minutes until his day officially began. 3 minutes of silence before he would retreat inside to begin crafting another investigative piece that fewer and fewer people seem to read in this digital age. Such was the rhythm of his solitary life. But at exactly 7:00 a.m., that rhythm shattered. A small figure in a bright pink winter coat appeared at the corner of Maple Street. Even from his balcony, Michael could see it was a little girl, no older than 5 or 6. Her blonde hair peeked out from beneath a knitted hat, catching what little sunlight filtered through the clouds. But it wasn't the child alone that caused Michael to freeze, coffee halfway to his lips. Flanking her on both sides, ahead and behind, were 5 massive German shepherds moving in perfect formation. The dogs were enormous, military-grade in their bearing and discipline. They moved as a coordinated unit, eyes constantly scanning the surroundings, bodies positioned strategically around the small girl. Their breath formed clouds in the cold morning air as they maintained their protective formation. "What in the world?" Michael muttered, setting down his coffee to reach for the camera he kept near the balcony door. Through the telephoto lens, he could see details invisible to the naked eye. The little girl's face, serious and focused. The worn pink coat, slightly too large for her small frame. And the pucks, powerful muscles rippling beneath thick winter coats. Alert eyes constantly monitoring the street. Not a single leash connected them to the child, yet they moved in perfect synchronization with her steps. Michael began snapping photos, journalist instincts taking over. No adult accompanied them. No one watched from nearby houses. Just a tiny girl commanding 5 animals that could each outweigh her 3 times over. As they passed beneath his balcony, Michael held his breath. He had worked with military dogs during his service years. He recognized training when he saw it. These weren't family pets. These were working behind precision instruments with teeth and claws, capable of taking down armed men. Yet they obeyed this child implicitly. The girl and her unusual companions continued down the street, turned at the corner by the old oak tree, and vanished from sight, leaving only a set of footprints in the fresh snow. Michael remained frozen, camera still raised. In that moment, something awakened in him, something dormant for years. Curiosity, purpose, the instinct that had once made him both a good soldier and a respected journalist. The solitary life he had accepted after Susan died suddenly felt hollow in comparison to the mystery that had just walked past his window. Inside his apartment, evidence of his isolation surrounded him. 1 coffee cup in the sink, 1 plate on the drying rack. Framed awards on the walls celebrating investigative pieces that had once changed lives. A single photo of his daughter Jennifer at her college graduation, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. The space beside her conspicuously empty, where Michael should have stood. He had missed the ceremony for an assignment overseas. One of many absences that had slowly eroded their relationship until their conversations became perfunctory holiday phone calls that grew shorter each year. The walls of his apartment suddenly felt suffocating. Michael uploaded the photos to his computer and began what he did best, investigating. For the next week, Michael adjusted his morning routine. Coffee brewed by 6:45, positioned by the window at 6:50, camera ready at 6:55, and precisely at 7:00 a.m., the girl and her canine guardians would appear, following the same route through the snow-covered streets. Through his lens, Michael documented patterns. The dogs maintained specific positions. The largest one, with a scar across its muzzle, always led the group. Another, slightly smaller, with a distinctive black mask, consistently walked beside the girl on her right. occasionally glancing up at her face as if checking her well-being. Three others maintained perimeter positions, rotating their attention outward, constantly vigilant. What struck Michael most was how the child directed them. No shouting, no treats, just occasional hand signals and quiet words he could not hear from his position. Military hand signals, he realized with growing fascination, the same ones he had learned decades ago. On the eighth morning, as Michael watched through his camera, something else entered the frame. A sleek black SUV crawled slowly down the street, keeping pace with the girl and her dogs. The vehicle's windows were tinted, but as it passed beneath a streetlight, Michael captured the face of the driver. A woman in her late 40s, hair pulled back severely from a face that might have been attractive, if not for the coldness in her eyes as she watched the child. She made notes on a tablet propped against the steering wheel, then drove away before the girl reached the corner. The next day, Michael saw the same woman speaking with neighbors, showing identification and making notes. Her professional smile never reached her eyes, but people seemed to respond to her authority. His journalist instincts prickling, Michael walked to the local coffee shop later that morning. Conversations paused briefly as he entered. Despite living in Oakridge for nearly 2 years, he remained an outsider, the reclusive writer who rarely engaged with the community. Martha Wilson, the elderly owner, nodded in recognition as he approached the counter. "The usual, Mr. Sullivan? Black coffee, no room for cream?" "Yes, thank you, and maybe some information if you have it." Martha raised an eyebrow as she poured his coffee. "Information costs extra these days." Michael smiled, the expression feeling rusty on his face. A woman was asking questions around town this morning. Professional looking, driving a black SUV. "Ah," Martha nodded, sliding his coffee across the counter. "Christine Reed, new director of Child Welfare and Animal Control, said she was doing community outreach, getting to know local concerns." She lowered her voice, but she seemed particularly interested in certain residents. "A little girl with 5 German shepherds, perhaps?" Martha studied him carefully before responding. "You noticed our little mystery too, then?" Yes, Ms. Reed had quite a few questions about that child. Michael took a sip of coffee. "What did you tell her?" "Same thing everyone tells her. Nobody knows much about the girl. She appeared about 6 months ago. Walks those dogs every morning. Same time, same route. Never speaks to anyone. Some say she lives with her aunt in the old Hayes place at the edge of town, but nobody ever sees the aunt." Michael paid for his coffee, leaving a generous tip. "Thank you, Martha. You've been very helpful." "Mr. Sullivan," Martha called as he turned to leave, "that child has been through enough. Whatever you're investigating, remember that." Michael nodded, understanding the warning. As a journalist, he had always followed stories wherever they led. But Martha was right. This wasn't just a story. This was a child. The next morning brought heavy snowfall. Michael wondered if the mysterious procession would appear in such conditions. But at 7 o'clock a.m. precisely, the small figure in pink emerged through the swirling snow, the 5 shepherds creating a protective formation around her. As they passed the intersection of Maple and Pine, a delivery truck skidded on the icy road, careening toward the sidewalk where the girl walked. Michael gasped, his coffee mug slipping from his fingers and shattering on the balcony floor. Before he could even shout a warning, the dogs exploded into action. The lead dog lunged forward, placing itself between the girl and the oncoming truck. The others instantly closed ranks, creating a living shield around the child, guiding her back and away from danger. The truck missed them by inches, sliding into a snowbank. The driver climbed out, shaken but unharmed. He approached the girl, perhaps to check if she was okay. The response from the dogs was immediate and terrifying. All 5 animals shifted positions, forming a barrier between the stranger and the child. The lead dog bared its teeth, a low growl rumbling from deep in its chest. The driver retreated quickly, hands raised in surrender. Through his telephoto lens, Michael watched the girl kneel beside the lead dog, placing a small gloved hand on its powerful neck. He could not hear her words, but the effect was instantaneous. The dog relaxed, though its eyes remained fixed on the retreating driver. In that moment, Michael made his decision. He needed to know who this child was and where she had learned to command these animals with such authority. He had seen enough from a distance. It was time to follow. That afternoon, Michael waited in his car down the street from where the girl and her dogs typically appeared. The snow had stopped, but the temperature had plummeted, turning the town into a crystalline landscape that sparkled under the winter sun. At precisely 4:30 p.m., they appeared again. The same formation, the same vigilance from the buzz. This time, the girl carried a small bag, possibly groceries. Michael waited until they passed, then followed at a distance in his car, moving slowly to avoid drawing attention. They wound through side streets until reaching the outskirts of town, where older homes sat on larger lots, partially hidden by trees and neglected hedges. The girl turned up a long driveway toward a two-story house that had once been grand but now showed signs of neglect. Peeling paint, shutters hanging askew, portions of the roof sagging under the weight of accumulated snow. Michael parked on the main road and watched through binoculars as the girl entered the house, the dogs filing in after her. No lights turned on, no adult greeted her. After several minutes, he heard the distant barking of what sounded like more dogs from inside the property. 3 days after their first encounter, Oakridge disappeared beneath a blanket of snow so thick that the town seemed erased from the map entirely. Streets vanished under pristine white drifts. Rooftops sagged beneath the weight of accumulated snowfall. Trees bowed, branches heavy with frozen crystals that transformed the landscape into something from a winter fairy tale. The storm had arrived with unexpected fury, dropping over 3 feet of snow in 72 hours. Weather forecasters called it the worst blizzard to hit the region in 3 decades. Roads became impassable. Power flickered across town, finally surrendering to darkness in the outer neighborhoods. The temperature plummeted to numbers that made exposed skin burn and lungs ache with each breath. Inside Martha Wilson's sturdy Victorian home, warmth radiated from a wood stove that crackled in defiance of the howling wind. The ancient furnace in the basement hummed steadily, pumping heat through vents that smelled faintly of dust and memories. The comfortable living room had transformed into an impromptu camp, with sleeping bags arranged near the fireplace and supplies stacked neatly against the wall. Michael Sullivan sat in an armchair by the window, watching the relentless snow through a small circle he had rubbed clear on the frosted glass. His military training had taught him to maintain awareness of surroundings even in sanctuary. Old habits resurface in times of crisis. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence within him. A man who had spent years observing life through a camera lens suddenly thrust into direct participation. Across the room, Emma Hayes sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by her 5 guardians. The German shepherds lay in a loose circle around her, alert even in rest. Alpha, the lead dog with a scar across his muzzle, rested his head on her lap as she read softly from a worn children's book. The other 4, Shadow, Echo, Titan, and Ranger, maintained their positions, ears twitching at every creak of the old house adjusting to the cold. Martha bustled in from the kitchen, carrying a tray with hot chocolate and cookies. The smell of sweet warmth filled the room, momentarily overshadowing the scent of wet dog fur and wood smoke. "The forecast says another day of heavy snow before it lets up," she announced, setting the tray on a side table. "Phone lines are down across most of the county, but my landline still works. Perks of never upgrading to those fancy digital systems." Michael accepted a steaming mug with a nod of thanks. "Any word from the sheriff's department about Reed?" Martha's expression darkened. "Cooper called an hour ago while you were chopping wood. Reed is filing additional paperwork claiming the dogs present an imminent danger to public safety. Once roads clear, she plans to return with animal control officers and a court order." Emma looked up from her book, fear flashing across her small face. Alpha sensed the change immediately, raising his head and pressing closer to her side. "They can't take them," she whispered, her voice small yet fierce. "They're not just dogs. They're Dad's partners." Michael exchanged glances with Martha. The elderly woman nodded slightly, giving permission to share what they had discovered. "Emma," Michael began gently, moving from the chair to kneel near her. "We need to talk about your Aunt Rachel." The girl's shoulders tensed. Alpha growled softly until she placed a calming hand on his head. "Is she in trouble?" Emma asked, not meeting Michael's eyes. "No, sweetheart," Martha interjected, settling into her rocking chair with a soft groan. "But we know she doesn't stay with you very often. That she only visits once a month or so." Emma stared at the pages of her book. "She has an important job. She travels a lot." Michael chose his next words carefully. "Emma, who takes care of you when Rachel isn't there?" I take care of myself, the child answered with practiced confidence. Dad taught me how, and the dogs help. Alpha knows when it's time for school, for dinner, for bed. Echo guards the door at night. Ranger finds help if I need it. The simplicity of her explanation broke something in Michael's chest. This tiny human had created a functional family unit with 5 canines, each assigned roles to substitute for absent adults. Your father taught you well, he said softly, but the law says children your age need adult guardians living with them all the time. Emma finally looked up, her eyes too old for her young face. Is that why Ms. Reed wants to take me away? Because Rachel doesn't stay? Martha leaned forward. Partly, dear, but there's more to it. Ms. Reed and your father had disagreements about how police dogs should be trained. Dad said she hurt dogs, Emma stated flatly, made them mean instead of brave. Michael nodded. Your father reported her for using cruel methods. She lost her position in law enforcement because of it. Understanding dawned on the child's face. So she wants to hurt Dad by taking his dogs. And me. The perceptiveness stunned Michael. This 5-year-old grasped human vengeance with clarity some adults never achieved. We won't let that happen, he promised, surprised by the conviction in his voice. But we need a plan, a legal way to ensure you and the dogs stay together. Martha sipped her hot chocolate thoughtfully. Rachel's temporary guardianship papers will only hold Reed off for so long. We need something more permanent. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the crackling fire and the howl of wind against windows. Even the Bayanas seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, watching the humans with intelligent eyes. Dad had papers, Emma said suddenly, important papers he kept in his special box, the one in the basement memorial. He said if anything happened to him, I should show them to people I trust. Michael sat straighter. What kind of papers, Emma? She shrugged small shoulders. Grown-up papers, with stamps and signatures. He showed them to me once, said they were for my protection. Martha and Michael exchanged meaningful glances. Legal documents could change everything. When the storm breaks, Michael said, we'll go back and find those papers. They might be exactly what we need. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as Martha shared stories of Oakridge from decades past. Emma gradually relaxed, eventually falling asleep against Alpha's warm side, her small hand still clutching the book. The massive dog remained perfectly still, unwilling to disturb her rest. Michael helped Martha clean up, carrying mugs to the kitchen where they could speak privately. She's extraordinary, he whispered, rinsing cups in the sink. Most adults couldn't handle what she's been through, let alone organize their life the way she has. Martha nodded, drying each mug with a weathered dish towel. Daniel raised her to be resilient. After her mother died during childbirth, he knew Emma might face a world without him someday. He prepared her the best way he knew how. Michael glanced toward the living room. By teaching her to command 5 military-grade canines? By teaching her to command respect, Martha corrected gently. Those animals would die for her not because they're trained to, but because she treats them with the same dignity her father did. They're partners, not possessions. The insight settled into Michael's consciousness, reshaping his understanding of the unusual bond he had witnessed. I called my daughter tonight, he said quietly, changing subjects, while you were reading to Emma. First time we've spoken more than 10 minutes in years. Martha's eyes softened. Jennifer, right? The professor in Boston? Michael nodded, surprised she remembered the details he had shared over coffee months ago. I told her about Emma, about what's happening here. And? She listened, really listened. Then she said something that hit me hard. Michael paused, swallowing against the tightness in his throat. She said, sounds like you're finally showing up for someone who needs you, Dad. Martha placed a comforting hand on his arm. The past can't be changed, Michael. But this moment, right now, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. The kitchen fell quiet except for the tick of an ancient clock and the distant moan of wind searching for entry through century-old joist. I failed Jennifer and Susan, Michael admitted, always chasing the next story, the next conflict zone. I thought providing financially was enough. By the time I realized what truly mattered, Susan was gone, and Jennifer had learned to live without me. Yet here you are, Martha observed, ready to fight for a child you barely know. Michael stared out the kitchen window at the swirling snow, illuminated by the porch light into millions of dancing crystals. Maybe that's why I'm here. One last chance to be the protector I should have been for my own family. The night passed slowly, the storm's fury increasing rather than abating. Michael took the first watch, military habits resurfacing. He checked doors and windows, adjusted the fire, and listened to the creaking protests of the old house standing firm against nature's assault. Around 3 in the morning, soft whimpering drew his attention to Emma. The child thrashed in her sleeping bag, caught in the grip of a nightmare. Alpha nudged her gently with his nose, attempting to wake her without frightening her further. Michael approached cautiously, aware of 4 sets of canine eyes tracking his movement. He knelt beside the sleeping child. "Emma," he whispered, "you're safe. It's just a dream." Her eyes flew open, momentarily wild with terror before recognition dawned. Without warning, she launched herself forward, small arms wrapping around Michael's neck. He froze, then carefully returned the embrace as she sobbed against his shoulder. "I saw Dad," she hiccuped between tears. "He was calling me, but I couldn't reach him. There was fire everywhere." Michael held her gently, his hand making small circles on her back the way he used to comfort Jennifer decades ago. The memory of his daughter's small body trembling after nightmares crashed through him with physical force. "Your dad is watching over you," he murmured, "through these magnificent creatures he trained, through the strength he helped build inside you." Emma's sobs gradually subsided. She pulled back, wiping her eyes with small fists. "Mr. Sullivan," she said seriously, "did you have a little girl once?" The question caught him unprepared. "Yes, her name is Jennifer. She's grown now, a professor at a university." "Do you miss her?" Michael's chest tightened. "Every day." Emma nodded as if confirming something important. "Dad said missing someone means they're still with you somehow, in your heart." The wisdom from such a young source left Michael momentarily speechless. She settled back into her sleeping bag, Alpha immediately repositioning himself against her side. "Will you stay close?" she asked sleepily. "Just until I fall asleep again." "I'll be right here," Michael promised, his voice rough with emotion. "Rest now, you're safe." As Emma drifted back to sleep, Michael remained beside her, watching the subtle rise and fall of her breathing. Alpha's intelligent eyes met his in the dim firelight, an understanding passing between man and beast. Both had found purpose in protection, redemption in guardianship. Morning arrived with blinding whiteness. The storm had finally exhausted itself overnight, leaving behind a transformed landscape and a silence so profound it seemed another presence in the room. Sunlight streamed through windows, creating pools of gold on wooden floors and illuminating dust motes that danced in the still air. Michael awoke from his uncomfortable position in the armchair to find Emma and the dogs gone from their sleeping spots. Momentary panic seized him until he heard childish laughter from the kitchen. He stood, stretching to relieve stiffness, and followed the sound. Emma sat at Martha's kitchen table, feeding small pieces of bacon to each dog in turn. They took the offerings with gentle precision, careful not to touch her fingers with their teeth. Martha stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. "The conquering hero awakens," Martha announced with a smile. "Coffee's fresh. Breakfast is almost ready." "How long was I out?" Michael asked, accepting a steaming mug gratefully. "Long enough for Emma to teach me the proper way to address each dog," Martha replied. "Apparently I've been speaking to them incorrectly all this time." Emma nodded seriously. "They understand English fine, but they respond better to certain tones and hand signals. Dad said it's because dogs listen with their whole bodies, not just their ears." Michael settled at the table, observing the child's confidence as she controlled 5 animals that could easily overpower her physically. Each motion she made carried authority beyond her years, yet tempered with obvious affection. "The phones are working again," Martha informed him. "Sheriff Cooper called. The plows should reach this neighborhood by afternoon." The news brought reality crashing back. Their peaceful snow globe existence would soon shatter as the outside world regained access. "Any update on Reed?" Michael asked, keeping his tone casual for Emma's benefit. Martha's expression conveyed everything he needed to know. "She's been busy. Multiple reports filed, emergency court hearings conducted by phone. Cooper sounded worried. After breakfast, Michael stepped onto the porch to assess conditions. The snow had drifted against the house in smooth white waves that reached above the windows in places. The street remained invisible beneath an unbroken blanket at least 4 feet deep. The world sparkled under the morning sun, deceptively beautiful despite the destruction hidden beneath. His phone suddenly vibrated in his pocket, surprising him. Cell service had returned. Missed calls and messages flooded the screen, most from unknown numbers. Journalists. The viral video of Emma had exploded across national media during the storm, evolving from local curiosity to nationwide controversy. One message stood out. Jennifer. Dad, saw the news about the girl with the lung. That's your story, isn't it? Call me when you can. I might be able to help. Hope flickered in his chest as he dialed her number. Jennifer answered on the second ring. You're alive, she said, relief evident in her voice. The storm looks apocalyptic on the news. We managed, Michael replied, warmed by her concern. But we have problems. The girl Emma is being targeted by a social services director with a personal vendetta. She wants to separate Emma from her father's service dogs. Jennifer's professional tone emerged, the professor of family law taking over. I've reviewed the viral footage. Those are clearly highly trained service animals, not pets. That distinction is legally significant. Michael explained everything from Hayes' death to Reed's connection to the situation. Jennifer listened without interruption, occasionally typing notes. This is complex, she finally said, but not hopeless. Service animals have special legal status. If those dogs were officially as part of Hayes' canine unit, there should be records designating their status. Furthermore, if Hayes left legal directives about his daughter's care, those would supersede standard protocols. Emma mentioned important papers in her father's memorial room. Michael said, we need to retrieve them once the road's clear. Time is critical, Jennifer warned. This Reed woman sounds determined. She's already building a paper trail to support her actions. They discussed legal strategies for several minutes before Jennifer hesitated, her voice softening. Dad, why this case? You've witnessed countless injustices during your career. What makes this different? Michael gazed across the snow-covered landscape, considering the question. Maybe I see in Emma what I missed in you, a chance to protect someone vulnerable before it's too late. Or maybe I'm just tired of documenting suffering without stopping it. The line went quiet for several heartbeats. Mom would be proud, Jennifer finally said. She always believed you had more heart than you showed the world. The conversation ended with promises to stay in touch. Michael returned inside with renewed determination, finding Martha organizing the living room while Emma brushed the dogs methodically, removing tangles from thick winter coats. We need to return to Emma's house, he announced. Those papers could be crucial to our case. Martha frowned. Cooper said the plows won't reach here until late afternoon. We don't need the plows, Emma interrupted, looking up from her grooming task. The dogs can make a path. They do it all the time in deep snow. Michael and Martha exchanged skeptical glances, but Emma was already giving commands. The 5 shepherds lined up at the front door, understanding their assignment before Emma had finished explaining it to the adults. When Michael opened the door, Alpha plunged into the deep snow, pushing forward with powerful shoulders. The others followed in a precise formation, each stepping into the track created by the dog ahead, effectively creating a narrow but passable trail through the drifts. They're making a wedge, Michael realized aloud, recognizing the tactical formation. Just like soldiers moving through difficult terrain. Emma nodded proudly. Dad taught them lots of formations. This one's for snow and tall grass. The unlikely procession made its way slowly through the winter landscape. The dogs rotated positions when the lead animal tired, maintaining their steady progress without verbal commands. Occasionally they would stop, testing the ground ahead for stability before proceeding. The journey to the Hayes house took nearly an hour, 3 times longer than normal. When they finally arrived, the property appeared abandoned, partially buried under massive drifts. The front door remained inaccessible, blocked by a fallen tree branch weighed down with ice and snow. Back door, Emma directed, leading them around the side of the house where the snow had drifted less severely. Inside, the house felt unnaturally cold, their breath visible in the frigid air. Water pipes had frozen, then burst, leaving puddles now frozen into treacherous ice patches on the kitchen floor. The roof had indeed begun to collapse in one corner, allowing snow to pile in the upstairs hallway. "We need to be quick," Michael cautioned. "This structure isn't stable." Emma led them directly to the basement door, which mercifully opened despite the house's shifting foundation. The memorial room below remained untouched by the storm's damage, protected by its underground position. While Martha and Emma searched the wooden memorial box for the papers, Michael examined the wall of photographs more carefully than before. Images of Hayes and his K-9 unit at competitions, ceremonies, and training exercises. Several showed a younger Hayes receiving commendations from police brass and military officials. One photo caught Michael's attention. Hayes stood proudly beside his dogs, but partially visible in the background was Christine Reed, her expression dark as she watched the ceremony. The date stamp indicated this was taken shortly after the investigation that ended her law enforcement career. "Found them," Emma announced triumphantly, holding up a manila envelope sealed with the official-looking tape. "Dad's important papers." Michael took the envelope carefully. Inside were several documents: Hayes's will, custody directives for Emma, and most importantly, official certification paperwork for each dog as law enforcement service animals. Additional documents detailed their specialized training and value to the department. "This is exactly what we need," Michael said, relief washing through him. "These establish the dogs as service animals with special legal status. Reed can't treat them like ordinary pets." Martha examined the custody papers with growing excitement. "Daniel named me as Emma's legal guardian if Rachel was unwilling or unable to fulfill the role. He must have known Rachel wouldn't actually care for Emma properly." The sound of creaking above them cut the celebration short. The house groaned under the weight of accumulated snow and ice, timbers protesting as gravity pulled relentlessly downward. "We need to leave," Michael urged, gathering the papers into the envelope. "Now." They had barely reached the basement stairs when a thunderous crack shook the entire structure. Plaster rained down from the ceiling as the first floor began to give way directly above them. "Run!" Michael shouted, pushing Emma and Martha ahead of him. They scrambled up the stairs as dust filled the air. The dogs bounded alongside them, somehow understanding the danger despite the unfamiliar nature of the threat. As they reached the kitchen, another section of ceiling collapsed behind them, narrowly missing Michael. The group made it to the back door just as the distinct sound of splintering wood echoed through the house. Martha stumbled on an ice patch, falling heavily against the doorframe. Michael helped her up, checking for injuries. "I'm fine," she insisted, though pain flashed across her weathered face. "Just get Emma out." They pushed through the back door into the blinding whiteness outside. Behind them, the venerable old house that had sheltered generations of the Hayes family surrendered to physics and time, the roof caving inward with a sound like thunder. Emma watched, tears streaming silently down her face as her childhood home collapsed. Alpha pressed against her side, offering what comfort he could. The other dogs formed a protective circle around the humans, alert for any secondary dangers. "Everything's gone," Emma whispered. "All Dad's things." Michael knelt beside her, grasping her small shoulders gently. "Not everything. We have the important papers. We have his flag. And most importantly, we have his partners." He gestured to the dogs. "Your home isn't that building, Emma. It's the family you've created with these magnificent animals." The child considered his words, then nodded with solemn understanding beyond her years. "We should go before more snow falls." The journey back to Martha's house seemed shorter somehow, despite Martha's painful limp from her fall. The dogs maintained their path-breaking formation, occasionally glancing back to ensure their humans followed safely. They had just reached Martha's street when a black SUV appeared in the distance, pushing slowly through the partially plowed road. Michael recognized it instantly. "Reed," he said quietly. "She must have gotten through on the main road." Martha tightened her grip on Emma's hand. "The papers. We have them now. She can't just take Emma." "She'll try," Michael replied, watching the vehicles approach. "And she'll have temporary authority on her side." Emma looked up at him, fear and determination battling in her young eyes. "What do we do?" Michael made his decision instantly. "We stand our ground. With the papers and the dog service animal certification, we can fight her legally. Running would only make things worse." The SUV stopped 30 yards away. Christine Reed emerged, immaculate despite the winter chaos surrounding her. She wore an expensive wool coat and leather gloves, her hair perfectly arranged beneath a fashionable hat. Behind her, two men in animal control uniforms exited the vehicle, eyeing the shepherds nervously. "Miss Reed," Michael greeted coldly as she approached. "Impressive dedication, fighting through these conditions." Reed's smile never reached her eyes. "Child welfare doesn't take snow days, Mr. Sullivan, especially when minors are at risk." She shifted her attention to Emma, her voice instantly transforming into honeyed concern. "Emma, sweetheart, I'm so relieved you're safe. We've been so worried." The little girl pressed closer to Michael's side. All five dogs shifted positions subtly, forming a more defensive arrangement around their charge. "I am safe," Emma stated firmly, "with my puys and my guardians." Reed's expression hardened momentarily before the professional mask slipped back into place. "Of course you feel that way, dear, but the court has entrusted me to ensure your proper care during this emergency." She produced a document from her coat pocket. "This emergency custody order authorizes me to place Emma in appropriate foster care until permanent arrangements can be made. It also authorizes animal control to evaluate and potentially remove dangerous animals from the situation." Martha stepped forward, wincing slightly from her injury. "That order is based on incomplete information. We have Daniel Hayes's legal directives regarding both Emma Mom and the service animals." Reed's composure faltered for the first time. "Service animals?" Michael removed the envelope from inside his coat. "Official certification for all five dogs as law enforcement service animals with special legal status. Also, Hayes's will and custody directives naming Martha Wilson as Emma's legal guardian in the event Rachel Morgan is unable to fulfill the role." "Which she clearly isn't," Martha added firmly. Reed's eyes narrowed. "Those documents would need to be authenticated by the court." "Of course," Michael agreed smoothly. "And until they are, any attempt to separate Emma from either her designated guardian or her father's service animals would be legally questionable, especially given your personal history with Officer Hayes." The animal control officers shifted uncomfortably, clearly not fully briefed on the situation's complexity. Reed stepped closer, lowering her voice so only Michael could hear. "You have no idea what those animals are capable of. Hayes didn't just train them for standard police work. They were part of a specialized tactical program with protocols even I found concerning. They're dangerous weapons, not pets." Michael met her gaze unflinchingly. "Yet they've protected a 5-year-old girl flawlessly for months. Curious how these dangerous weapons show more compassion than certain humans." A plow truck appeared at the end of the street, its engine rumbling as it pushed mountains of snow aside. Sheriff Cooper sat in the passenger seat, his expression grim as he spotted the confrontation unfolding. Reed recognized her position weakening. "This isn't over, Mr. Sullivan. Those papers change nothing until a judge reviews them. I'll be back with a proper court order." "We'll be waiting," Michael responded calmly, "with legal representation." Reed turned sharply and stalked back to her SUV, the animal control officers following reluctantly. As they drove away, Cooper approached on foot, having disembarked from the plow. "You folks all right?" he asked, surveying the group. "We've been trying to reach you since yesterday." Martha explained the situation, including the collapse of the Hayes house and their discovery of the legal documents. Cooper listened thoughtfully, occasionally glancing at the dogs who maintained their vigilant formation around Emma. "Reed's been pushing hard," he admitted when Martha finished, "called in favors with judges, painted this as an emergency situation requiring immediate intervention. But those service animal certifications change things. And if Hayes legally designated you as guardian, Martha, that carries significant weight." "Will it be enough?" Michael asked. Cooper sighed heavily. "Honestly, I don't know. Reed has connections throughout the system. She's building a case about Emma's welfare and the potential danger of the dogs. The fact that the Hayes house is now uninhabitable gives her additional ammunition." Emma, who had been silently listening to the adult conversation, spoke up. "Sheriff Cooper, my dad trusted you. He said you were one of the good ones." The weathered lawman knelt to her level, respect evident in his posture. "Your father was the finest officer I ever worked with, Emma. He saved my life once, did you know that?" She nodded solemnly. "During the bank robbery, you were shot, and Dad and Alpha found you in time." Cooper smiled sadly. "That's right. Alpha here was just a rookie then, but he tracked me down when everyone else had given up. I haven't forgotten." He stood facing Michael and Martha. I'll do what I can within the law, but prepare yourselves. Reed won't stop until she gets what she wants." After Cooper left, promising to check on them later, the group made their way into Martha's warm house. The elderly woman settled heavily into her favorite chair, her injured hip clearly causing more pain than she would admit. Michael helped Emma feed and water the dogs, while Martha called her personal physician. The adrenaline of confrontation and escape gradually faded, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Emma curled up on the sofa with Alpha, both falling asleep within minutes. Left alone with his thoughts, Michael stared out the window at the broken beauty of the winter landscape. The worst of the storm had passed, but he could feel another gathering on the horizon, this one man-made and potentially more destructive. His phone buzzed with a message from Jennifer. "Dad, I've reviewed the documents you sent. Good news and concerning news. Call when you can." The call revealed both the strength of their position and its vulnerabilities. The service animal certifications were indeed powerful legal protection, but Reed could still argue that a 5-year-old couldn't properly handle such specialized animals. The custody directives were clear, but temporary custody could still be granted while the court evaluated Martha's suitability as guardian. "We need community support," Jennifer advised. "Statements from neighbors, local officials, anyone who can testify to Emma's bond with the pigs and Martha's capability as guardian. Reed is building a paper narrative. You need to counter with human testimony." Michael thought of Cooper, Dr. Jenkins, the veterinarian, neighbors who had silently supported Emma after her father's death. A community that had allowed a child to create her own family with 5 extraordinary animals, rather than forcing her into a system that would have separated them. "I can build that case," he assured for sure, "if we can hold Reed off long enough to present it properly." After ending the call, Michael found Martha awake and watching him from her chair. Her physician had come and gone, diagnosing a badly bruised hip, but thankfully no breaks. "We need to gather support," Michael explained, outlining Jennifer's strategy. "People who can testify about Emma and the dogs." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "Daniel was beloved in this town. There are many who would speak for his daughter." They began making calls, reaching out to the community that had silently watched over Emma. By evening, a network of support had formed. Dr. Jenkins promised documentation of the dog's excellent health and behavior. Cooper agreed to testify about their service history. Neighbors committed to statements about Emma's maturity and the buck's protective but controlled behavior. As darkness fell once more, Michael stepped onto the porch for a moment of solitude. The temperature had dropped again, freezing the day's slight melt into a glittering crust. Stars appeared in the clearing sky, brilliant against the black canvas of night. He heard the door open behind him and turned to find Emma standing there, bundled in a blanket, Alpha faithfully at her side. "You should be sleeping," Michael said gently. "I had another dream about Dad," she replied, moving to stand beside him. But it wasn't scary this time. He was smiling. Michael waited, sensing she had more to say. "Mr. Sullivan, why are you helping us? You didn't even know me before." The question deserved an honest answer. "Sometimes we get second chances to do things right. I wasn't there for my daughter when she needed me. I was always chasing the next story, thinking my work was more important than being present." He looked down at her serious young face. "When I saw you walking those dogs that first morning, something told me this was important. More important than any story I've ever written." Emma considered this with the careful deliberation children sometimes bring to adult revelations. "Dad said people come into our lives for a reason," she finally stated, "even when it seems like coincidence." Michael smiled at her wisdom. "Your father sounds like he was very smart." "He was," she agreed solemnly, "and brave, but also sad sometimes, after Mom died. He said the dogs helped him remember how to be happy again." She paused, looking up at Michael with penetrating clarity. "Maybe that's why you're here, to remember too." Before Michael could respond to this profound observation, headlights appeared at the end of the street, multiple vehicles moving slowly through the still partially snow-covered road. Alpha growled low in his throat, sensing tension in both humans. The other dogs appeared silently in the doorway behind them, responding to some silent communication from their leader. "Emma, go inside," Michael directed quietly, recognizing Reed's SUV among the approaching vehicles. But the child stood her ground, straightening to her full height, which barely reached Michael's waist. No, we faced them together. That's what Dad would do. As the vehicles drew closer, red and blue lights began flashing atop one of them. Sheriff Cooper's patrol car. The convoy stopped in front of Martha's house. Doors opened. Figures emerged in the darkness. Michael placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder as Alpha pressed against her other side. Whatever came next, they would indeed face it together. The final confrontation had arrived sooner than expected. The true storm was upon them. Returning to town, Michael headed straight to the local library. The elderly librarian helped him access archives of the local newspaper. He searched recent months for any mention of German shepherds, canine units, or unusual custody situations. On the fourth microfiche roll, he found it, a story from 6 months earlier about a local hero. Officer Daniel Hayes, K-9 unit commander, killed during a hostage rescue operation gone wrong. The accompanying photo showed Hayes in uniform, standing proudly beside 5 German shepherds. The same dogs now walking with the little girl. The article mentioned Hayes was survived by a daughter, Emma, age 5. No mention of a wife or other family, just a daughter in his K-9 unit. Everything clicked into place. The girl was Emma Hayes. The dogs had belonged to her father. But what happened after his death? Who was caring for her now? And why was Christine Reed suddenly interested in them? That evening, Michael sat at his computer, researching Christine Reed. Her LinkedIn profile listed an impressive career trajectory through various social services departments across 3 states. Always moving up, never staying in one place longer than 2 years. A search through public records revealed a pattern. In each jurisdiction where Reed worked, there were spikes in child removals from homes, but few success stories of family reunifications. Multiple complaints filed against her were all dismissed by supervisors. Digging deeper, Michael discovered Reed had begun her career in law enforcement, specifically in canine training, before abruptly changing to social services 15 years ago. The timing coincided with a departmental investigation into training methods that was ultimately closed without findings. A reference caught his eye. One of the investigating officers in that case, Lieutenant Daniel Hayes. Michael leaned back in his chair, processing the connection. Had Hayes reported Reed for something? Was her sudden interest in his daughter and dogs motivated by something more personal than professional concern? His investigation was interrupted by a notification on his phone, a video going viral on social media. Mystery girl commands army of dogs. Someone had filmed Emma and her canine guardians from a car window. The comment section exploded with theories and concerns. Where are her parents? Those dogs look dangerous. Someone should call social services. Michael grimaced. Emma's routine had been exposed to the world. The clock was now ticking. 2 days later, the worst snowstorm in decades was forecasted to hit Oakridge. Residents rushed to stock up on supplies, preparing for potential power outages and impassable roads. Michael joined them at the local market, filling his cart with essentials. As he loaded bags into his trunk, he spotted a small figure struggling through the snow across the parking lot. Emma, her arms wrapped around a grocery bag almost as big as she was, the 5 shepherds creating a perimeter around her as always. Without thinking, Michael grabbed another bag and approached. "Let me help you with that," he called out, keeping his voice gentle. The reaction was instantaneous. All 5 dogs pivoted toward him, bodies tensing. The lead dog stepped forward, teeth bared, a growl rumbling from deep in its chest. Michael froze, years of military training kicking in. No sudden movements, no direct eye contact with the dog. He spoke calmly, using the commanding tone he had learned during his service. "Easy, boy. Stand down. Not a threat." The dog paused, head tilting slightly in recognition of the commands. Emma stared at Michael with wide ease, surprise evident on her small face. "You know the commands," she said softly, her voice clear despite its childish pitch. "Like my dad." Michael nodded slowly. "I worked with military dogs many years ago. May I help you carry your groceries? That bag looks heavy for someone your size." Emma studied him for a long moment before nodding. "Alpha, stand down. Friend." The lead dog immediately relaxed, moving back to its position beside her. Michael approached carefully, taking the heavy bag from her arms. "I live in the apartment building on Maple. I see you and your friends walking every morning." "They need exercise," Emma replied simply. Dad said they need to walk every day, no matter what. They trudged through the deepening snow together, the dogs maintaining their protective formation around them both now. Your father trained them well, Michael commented. He was the best, Emma said, pride mixing with sadness in her voice. They were his partners. Now they protect me instead. Michael glanced down at her. Who else lives with you, Emma? Your mom or another relative? The child tensed slightly. How do you know my name? I saw an article about your father in the newspaper. He was a hero. Emma relaxed somewhat. Aunt Rachel takes care of me, but she works a lot. She says I'm very mature for my age. Aunt Rachel leaves you alone with the dogs? Emma nodded. Alpha takes care of me when she's gone, and the other dogs too. They never leave me. As they approached the old house, Michael noticed how isolated it was from neighbors. Perfect for housing multiple dogs, but concerning for a child living there with minimal supervision. Thank you for helping, Emma said as they reached the front porch. She set down her bag to open the door, and her sleeve pulled up slightly. Through his years of journalism, Michael had developed an eye for details. The small scar on her wrist caught his attention immediately. A familiar pattern. Medical restraints. His heart sank. Emma, he began carefully, has anyone ever hurt you? The child tensed, pulling her sleeve down quickly. No, I fell when Dad died. Her eyes avoided his. Thank you for helping. I need to go now. Before Michael could respond, Emma took the grocery bag from him and slipped inside. The door closed firmly, followed by the sound of multiple locks engaging. As Michael turned to leave, he noticed something on one of the dogs that had followed Emma inside. A metal tag on the collar of the one she had called Alpha. Not a typical pet ID, a military service number, partially obscured but recognizable. These weren't just police dogs. They were specialized tactical canine units, potentially worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in training and capabilities. The kind used in high-risk operations and VIP protection. And they were now guarding a 5-year-old girl. That evening, as the first heavy snowflakes of the coming storm began to fall, Michael sat in his car watching the Hayes house from a distance. No other cars approached. No adults came or went. Only a small light visible through a downstairs window indicated anyone was home. A tap on his window startled him. Martha Wilson from the coffee shop stood beside his car, bundled against the cold, looking at him with concern. Michael rolled down his window. You'll freeze out here, Mr. Sullivan, she said, and you'll draw attention. I'm worried about her, Michael admitted. She's alone in there. Martha glanced toward the house. Not completely alone. Those dogs would die protecting her. She sighed. I leave food on the porch sometimes. Other neighbors do too. We all know something isn't right, but Emma runs away whenever social services comes looking. What about her Aunt Rachel? Martha snorted. Rachel Morgan shows up once a month, stays a few hours, then disappears again. Enough to keep up appearances. She was Daniel's friend from the academy, agreed to be listed as guardian after he died, but she never wanted a child. And no one reports this? To whom? Christine Reed? Martha shook her head. That woman has had it out for the Hayes family for years. She would separate Emma from those dogs in a heartbeat. Those animals are all the child has left of her father. Michael frowned. What happened between Reed and Hayes? Years ago, Hayes reported Reed for cruel training methods when they both worked K9. The investigation was buried, but Reed was transferred out. Her career in law enforcement was effectively over. She rebuilt herself in social services, but never forgot who ruined her first career. The pieces were falling into place, and now she has authority over Hayes' daughter. Exactly. Martha handed Michael a thermos. Hot coffee. Go home, Mr. Sullivan. The storm is coming. We can discuss this tomorrow. As Martha walked away, Michael called after her. Why are you telling me this? Why trust me with this information? She turned back, snowflakes catching in her gray hair. Because you see her, not just a case or a problem to solve. You see Emma, and she needs someone who sees her right now. Michael drove home as the snow began falling more heavily. His apartment felt colder than usual despite the heating. The framed photo of his daughter seemed to watch him accusingly from the shelf. I know, he whispered to the empty room. I failed you. I was always chasing the next story, the next assignment. I missed your performances, Your graduations? I wasn't there when you and your mother needed me most. He touched the frame gently. Maybe this is my chance to do better, to be the protector I should have been for you. The following morning, Michael awoke to a transformed world. Snow had fallen continuously overnight, burying Oakridge under nearly 2 feet of pristine white. The town lay silent under its winter blanket, streets impassable, most residents wisely remaining indoors. From his balcony, he could see the viral video of Emma had spread further overnight. Local news stations were now picking up the story, questioning why a young child was walking dangerous dogs alone. Comments called for authorities to intervene. Michael's phone rang, an unknown number. "Michael Sullivan," he answered. "Mr. Sullivan." The voice was smooth, professional. "This is Christine Reed from Child Welfare Services. I understand you've been asking questions about Emma Hayes." Michael tensed. "I'm a journalist. Asking questions is what I do." "A journalist should understand the concept of privacy, especially regarding minors," Reed replied coldly. "Emma Hayes is under the guardianship of her aunt. Any concerns about her welfare should be directed to my office, not investigated by civilians." "And will your investigation be impartial, Ms. Reed, given your history with her father?" A pause. When Reed spoke again, her voice had hardened. "I don't know what you think you know, Mr. Sullivan, but interfering with a child welfare case is a serious matter. I suggest you focus on stories better suited to your expertise, like departmental investigations into canine training methods from 15 years ago?" Michael asked. "I hear that would make quite a compelling article." "Be careful, Mr. Sullivan," Reed said quietly. "You have no idea what you're involving yourself in. Emma Hayes will be placed in appropriate care, and those animals will be properly assessed by professionals. This is happening with or without your approval." The line went dead. Michael stared at his phone, anger and determination rising within him. Reed had all but confirmed his suspicions. This wasn't about Emma's welfare. This was personal. His phone rang again immediately. "Martha Wilson. Mr. Sullivan, you need to get to the Hayes house now. Reed just filed for emergency custody. She's claiming Emma is in imminent danger from the dogs. They're going to take her today, before the storm gets worse." Michael grabbed his coat. "I'm on my way." The streets were nearly impassable, but Michael's SUV pushed through the deep snow, wipers fighting a losing battle against the thickening snowfall. He mentally cataloged everything he had learned. Emma Hayes, effectively orphaned, living with minimal adult supervision, but protected by her father's highly trained K-9 unit. K-9. Christine Reed, harboring a grudge against Hayes, now positioned to separate the child from her only remaining connection to her father. As he approached the Hayes property, Michael saw 2 vehicles already parked outside. A black SUV he recognized as Reed's, and a police cruiser. His heart sank. He parked behind them and trudged through knee-deep snow to the front porch. The door stood open despite the cold. Inside, he could hear Reed's voice, artificially sweet. "Emma, sweetheart, we only want what's best for you. These animals are dangerous. They need to be with professionals." Michael stepped inside. The entryway opened to a living room where the confrontation was unfolding. Emma stood with her back to a hallway door, the 5 shepherds forming a semicircle in front of her. Their posture was defensive but disciplined, muscles tense beneath thick fur. Reed stood several feet away, a male officer beside her looking distinctly uncomfortable. Her face was composed in a mask of concern, but her eyes were cold. "Mr. Sullivan," Reed acknowledged without looking at him, "this is not your concern." "I believe it is," Michael replied, brushing snow from his coat. "Emma invited me here earlier. A small lie, but necessary. We were discussing her father's legacy." Emma's eyes widened slightly, but she caught on quickly. "Yes, Mr. Sullivan is writing about my dad, about what a hero he was." Reed's smile tightened. "How thoughtful. But right now, we need to focus on your safety, Emma. Officer Cooper and I are here to take you somewhere warm and safe until this storm passes." "I am safe," Emma insisted. "Alpha and the others protect me." "That's what worries me, sweetheart," Reed said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Those are not pets. They're trained attack dogs." Michael stepped forward. "They're service animals, highly trained K-9 officers who served alongside her father. They're continuing their duty by protecting his daughter." Officer Cooper shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Reed, maybe we should reconsider this emergency order. The roads are getting worse, and the child does appear safe. Reed turned to him sharply. The court has already ruled. That paperwork is valid. This child cannot remain alone with dangerous animals during this storm. She's not alone, Michael stated firmly, moving to stand beside Emma. I'll be staying with her until the storm passes. You have no legal standing here, Reed snapped, her professional veneer cracking. Actually, came a new voice from the doorway. I believe I do. Everyone turned to see Martha Wilson stomping snow from her boots as she entered. Despite her age, she carried herself with authority as she crossed to stand with Michael and Emma. Rachel Morgan appointed me as emergency backup guardian for Emma before she left town last week, Martha stated, producing a notarized document from her purse, which makes me the legal guardian until Rachel returns. Reed snatched the paper, scanning it with narrowed eyes. This is irregular. But legal, Martha countered. Check with the county clerk if you wish. It was filed properly. Officer Cooper cleared his throat. Ms. Reed, if Mrs. Wilson is the designated guardian and she's present with another responsible adult, I don't see grounds for emergency removal during this weather emergency. Reed's composure slipped entirely for a moment, her face twisting with anger before she regained control. This isn't over, she said quietly. Those animals are a public safety concern. Once this storm passes, we will conduct a full assessment. She turned to leave, then paused beside Michael. You have no idea what you're getting involved in, she whispered. Those dogs have a history even Hayes tried to hide. After Reed and the officer left, Martha closed the door against the howling wind, engaging multiple locks. That woman has been waiting for this opportunity for years, she said, shaking her head. Michael turned to Emma, who was kneeling beside Alpha, arms wrapped around the massive dog's neck. Are you okay? Emma nodded, but her small shoulders trembled. She wants to take them away. Dad said never to let them be separated. He made me promise. Why, Bea? Michael asked gently. Why is it so important they stay together? Emma hesitated, then rose to her feet with determination that seemed much older than her years. I need to show you something. Something Dad only showed people he trusted completely. She led Michael and Martha to the door she had been guarding. It opened to reveal a staircase descending into darkness. Emma flipped on a switch, illuminating a finished basement, unlike anything Michael could have imagined. The walls were covered with photos, commendations, and memories. Hayes in uniform with his dogs at various ceremonies and training events. Certificates of specialized training, maps, and tactical layouts. But most striking was the center of the room, a wooden box draped with the folded police flag. Around it, 5 dog beds arranged in a semicircle, each with the name of one of the shepherds embroidered on the side. This is where Dad trained them, Emma said softly, where he taught me how to give commands. After he died, they brought his things here. I made this place for him. Michael approached the memorial reverently. The craftsmanship of the wooden box, clearly made by a child's hands with adult guidance, brought a lump to his throat. This wasn't just a shrine to a fallen officer. This was a daughter's love for her father, preserved in the only way she knew how. Emma, he asked gently, why did your father make you promise to keep the dogs together? What was he afraid of? The little girl looked up at him, her eyes far too serious for someone so young. Dad said they know things, important things. He said bad people might want to use them, or hurt them, or make them forget their training. She stroked Alpha's head as the dog leaned against her. He said as long as they stay together with me, they'll remember the right way, the way he taught them. Michael knelt to meet her eyes. And Ms. Reed, did your father mention her specifically? Emma nodded slowly. He said she taught dogs to hurt people, really hurt them. Dad taught them to protect. That's different. Martha placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. Daniel Hayes discovered Reed was training dogs for private security firms using prohibited methods, methods that made the dogs unpredictable and dangerous. He reported her, but the department buried it to avoid scandal. The sound of cracking wood from above interrupted them. Martha looked up in alarm. The roof. Too much snow. Michael's instincts took over. Everyone upstairs, now. We need to get essentials and move to Martha's house before this place becomes unstable. As they hurried upstairs, Emma paused to look back at the memorial. We can't leave him, she whispered. Michael understood immediately. We'll take the flag, Emma. and whatever else is most important. Your father lives in your heart, not in things. The little girl nodded, tears filling her eyes as she carefully folded the police flag from the memorial box. He would want us to be safe. That always came first. As they gathered essentials and prepared to leave for Martha's more structurally sound home, Michael watched Emma commanding the dogs with quiet authority beyond her years. 5 deadly weapons transformed into gentle guardians by the love of a child. He thought of his own daughter, how he had failed to protect her from life's hardships by simply not being present. The chance to make amends for that failure had long passed. But here now he had been given another opportunity. A chance to be the protector he should have been, to stand between a child and those who would harm her, to honor the legacy of a father who had given everything to keep his daughter safe. Outside, the storm howled, snow piling against windows and doors. But inside, as Emma clutched her father's flag and the dogs formed a protective circle around her, Michael made a silent promise. This child would not face her battles alone. Not anymore. 3 days after the great storm, Oakridge emerged from its frozen cocoon. The morning sun climbed over the eastern hills, casting long blue shadows across a landscape transformed. What had been streets were now glistening corridors between mountains of plowed snow. What had been familiar buildings now stood like frosted castles beneath ice-laden eaves. The temperature had risen just enough to soften the cruel edge of winter, allowing the town to exhale a collective breath of relief. Inside Martha Wilson's Victorian home, Emma Hayes sat by the front window, her small fingers tangled in Alpha's thick fur. The massive dog leaned against her chair, his vigilant eyes never leaving the street outside. The other 4 shepherds maintained their positions throughout the living room, a canine security system alert to every sound and movement. In the kitchen, Michael Sullivan and Martha spoke in hushed tones with Sheriff Cooper, their voices occasionally rising then falling again, like waves against a shore. Emma didn't need to hear their words to understand. The convoy of vehicles that had arrived last night had brought both allies and enemies. Sheriff Cooper had intercepted Christine Reed and her entourage of court officials and animal control officers, forcing a tense standoff that ended with Reed retreating temporarily, promising to return with additional legal authority. "It's just a delay," Cooper had explained as the vehicles departed. "Reed is requesting an emergency hearing first thing tomorrow morning. Judge Preston will likely grant her request." Now morning had come, golden and deceptively peaceful. Emma watched a cardinal land on the snow-covered birch tree outside, its brilliant red plumage startling against the white backdrop. Alpha noticed it too, his ears twitching forward, though his body remained pressed protectively against her side. "He's beautiful, isn't he?" she whispered to the dog. "Dad used to say red birds in winter are like hope with feathers." Alpha's soft whine acknowledged her words. Emma sometimes believed the dogs understood everything, not just commands. Her father had insisted they comprehended far more than most handlers realized. The murmur of adult voices from the kitchen grew louder, then fell silent. Footsteps approached the living room. Emma straightened in her chair, composing herself the way her father had taught her. "Always face difficult things with your chin up," he would say. "It doesn't mean you aren't scared. It means you're brave enough to be scared and still stand tall." Michael entered first, his weathered face set in lines of determination. Martha followed, leaning on a cane, her injured hip clearly paining her despite the medication. Sheriff Cooper came last, his uniform immaculate despite the chaos of recent days, his expression grave beneath his silver crew cut. "Emma," Michael began, kneeling beside her chair to meet her eyes directly. "Sheriff Cooper needs to take us to the courthouse. Judge Preston has agreed to hear our case this morning." Emma nodded solemnly. "Will all the dogs come too?" The adults exchanged glances before Cooper answered. "The judge has authorized Alphas to accompany you as your primary service animal. The others will need to remain here with a caretaker." "They won't like being separated," Emma said, concern creasing her small brow. "And Jenkins has agreed to stay with them," Martha explained, gesturing toward the kitchen where the veterinarian waited. "She knows them well and they trust her." Emma considered this, then turned to Alpha. The massive shepherd sat alert, somehow sensing his selection for this important mission. Emma placed both hands on either side of his scarred muzzle, looking directly into his intelligent eyes. "Maintain the home," she commanded firmly, using the special voice her father had taught her. "Protect but obey. Dr. Jenkins has command until we return. Alpha blinked once in acknowledgement. Emma then turned to the other four dogs, repeating the command. Each dog responded with a subtle shift in posture, accepting the order with military precision. Michael watched this exchange with renewed amazement. The bond between child and animals transcended typical pet relationships. These were working partners, a unit founded on mutual trust and absolute clarity of purpose. "We should go," Cooper said quietly. "Reed and her team are already at the courthouse." The journey through town revealed the storm's full impact. Massive snowdrifts lined the streets like frozen waves. Workers cleared fallen trees and repaired downed power lines. Neighbors helped neighbors dig out buried cars and clear walkways. The community had survived nature's assault and emerged with that peculiar solidarity disaster often creates. At the county courthouse, a stately brick building with columns now adorned with icicles like crystal spears, a small crowd had gathered despite the conditions. News of the unusual custody case had spread. Local residents stood in small clusters, stamping feet against the cold, breath-forming clouds that dissipated in the winter air. As Cooper's patrol car approached, people turned to watch. Emma sat straight in the back seat, Alpha beside her, Michael on her other side. Martha rode in front with Cooper, occasionally glancing back with encouraging smiles that didn't quite reach her worried eyes. "Remember," Michael said quietly to Emma as Cooper parked, "no matter what happens in there, we're fighting for you, Em. Your father's papers give us strong legal standing. Just tell the truth when asked, and let the adults handle the rest." Emma nodded, her small hand finding Michael's larger one and squeezing with surprising strength. "Dad said truth always wins eventually, even when lies seem stronger at first." The wisdom in her words momentarily stole Michael's voice. He simply squeezed back, a silent promise passing between them. Inside the courthouse, their footsteps echoed on marble floors, worn smooth by decades of justice sought and sometimes found. Alpha moved beside Emma with perfect composure, his training evident in every controlled step. People stopped to stare at the unusual pair, a tiny girl in a freshly pressed dress Martha had altered to fit her, walking beside a massive German shepherd whose alert eyes continuously scanned for threats. In the hallway outside courtroom 3, Christine Reed waited with her legal team. Her expression darkened at the sight of Alpha, but she quickly composed herself, approaching with professional detachment. "Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Wilson," she acknowledged with a curt nod. "I hope you understand, this proceeding is simply about ensuring proper care for Emma during this difficult transition." Michael met her gaze steadily. "We understand exactly what this proceeding represents, Ms. Reed. A chance for the court to recognize Emma's legal guardian as designated by her father and to honor his wishes regarding his service animals." Reed's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. She glanced down at Emma, who stood partially shielded behind Michael's leg, Alpha positioned protectively at her side. "Emma, sweetheart," Reed said, her voice shifting to honeyed concern. "The judge just wants what's best for you. Sometimes adults need to make hard decisions that children don't understand at first." Alpha growled softly, so quietly only those immediately present could hear. Reed stepped back instinctively, her professional mask slipping for just an instant to reveal genuine fear. "Alpha, quiet," Emma commanded softly. The dog immediately ceased, though his eyes remained fixed on Reed with unnerving intensity. The courtroom doors opened, saving Reed from further response. A bailiff announced Judge Preston was ready to begin the emergency hearing. Inside, the courtroom stood nearly empty, emergency proceedings being closed to the general public. Judge Preston, a stern woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes, surveyed the assembled parties from her elevated bench. Her gaze lingered momentarily on Alpha before shifting to Emma. "Young lady," she addressed Emma directly, her voice firm but not unkind. "Is that animal under your complete control at all times?" Emma stepped forward, chin raised. "Yes, Your Honor. Alpha is a trained police service animal. My father was his handler before he died." Judge Preston nodded, apparently satisfied with both the answer and the composure with which it was delivered. "Very well. He may remain, provided he maintains his current behavior." The proceeding began with Reed's presentation. Her attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit, outlined their position with practiced precision. Emma Hayes, orphaned by tragedy, had been inadequately supervised by her designated guardian. The child had been effectively living alone with dangerous animals. The Hayes home was now condemned due to structural damage. The temporary arrangement with Martha Wilson, while well-intentioned, could not provide appropriate care given Martha's advanced age and recent injury. The dogs, regardless of their training, represented an unacceptable risk to a child so young. Michael listened with growing tension, noting how skillfully Reed's attorney wove facts and implications together. The narrative painted Emma as a victim of neglect rather than a child honoring her father's legacy with extraordinary capability. When Reed's team finished, Jennifer Sullivan rose from her seat beside Martha. Michael felt a surge of emotions seeing his daughter in her professional element. She had arrived early that morning, having driven through the night from Boston after reviewing the case documents. Now she stood tall in the courtroom, the spitting image of her mother with Susan's confidence and Michael's determination etched into every line of her posture. "Your Honor," Jennifer began, her voice clear and assured, "the state's presentation, while emotionally compelling, fundamentally misrepresents both the facts and the law governing this case." She proceeded methodically, introducing Daniel Hayes's legal directives designating Martha Wilson as Emma's guardian in the absence of Rachel Morgan's willingness to serve. She presented the service animal certifications for all 5 dogs, highlighting their specialized training and protected status under both state and federal regulations. Most effectively, she introduced statements from community members documenting Emma's exceptional maturity and the dog's impeccable behavior. "This is not a case of neglect, Your Honor," Jennifer continued. "This is a case of extraordinary resilience. Emma Hayes lost her father, the only parent she had ever known. Rather than abandoning her father's legacy, she maintained it with courage beyond her years. The animals Mrs. Reed characterizes as dangerous have been Emma's protectors, companions, and connection to her father. Their separation would constitute not protection, but punishment for a child who has already lost too much." Throughout Jennifer's presentation, Emma sat between Michael and Martha, her small shoulders square, her eyes occasionally finding Alpha for reassurance. The shepherd remained perfectly still beside her chair, a living embodiment of the discipline and devotion that defined the unusual family they had formed. Judge Preston listened attentively, occasionally making notes or asking clarifying questions. When both sides had presented their initial arguments, she addressed Emma directly once more. "Emma Hayes," she said, leaning forward slightly, "I would like to ask you some questions. Would that be all right?" Emma nodded, standing to approach the witness stand as directed by the bailiff. Alpha moved to follow, but Emma turned, holding up one small hand. "Stay," she commanded quietly. The dog immediately sat, though his eyes never left her. Once Emma was settled in the witness chair, Judge Preston softened her formal demeanor slightly. "Emma, how long have you known these dogs?" "All my life, Your Honor," Emma replied. "Dad brought Alpha home when I was a baby. The others joined our family as they completed training." "And who has been taking care of you since your father died?" Emma considered the question carefully. "Different people help different ways. Aunt Rachel visits sometimes and brings supplies. Mrs. Martha leaves food and checks on me. The dogs protect me and keep me company. I take care of myself the ways Dad taught me." "That's quite a lot of responsibility for someone so young," Judge Preston observed. "Dad said responsibility isn't about age. It's about understanding what needs to be done and doing it even when it's hard." Emma's voice remained steady, though her hands twisted slightly in her lap. Judge Preston's expression revealed nothing of her thoughts. "What happens when you get sick or scared at night?" "Alpha knows when I'm sick. He stays close and gets help if I need it. When I'm scared, all the dogs sleep near me. Dad said they can sense feelings better than people sometimes." The questioning continued for several minutes, Judge Preston probing gently but thoroughly into Emma's daily life, education, and relationship with the service animals. Throughout, Emma answered with a combination of childlike directness and surprising insight. When Emma returned to her seat, Judge Preston called a brief recess to consider the evidence presented. As they waited in the hallway outside, Jennifer approached Michael, genuine admiration in her eyes. "That child is remarkable," she said quietly. "I've represented hundreds of children in family court. None have shown Emma's level of composure and clarity." Michael nodded, watching Emma kneel beside Alpha, whispering reassurances to the vigilant shepherd. Hayes raised her to be independent. He must have known she might face life without him someday. The judge seems impressed, Martha observed hopefully. Worstly, she can see separating Emma from the dogs would be cruel. Jennifer's expression remained cautiously optimistic. Judge Preston has a reputation for respecting children's perspectives while maintaining strict adherence to legal standards. The service animal certifications help significantly, but Reed's team has raised valid concerns about Emma's housing situation now that the Hayes home is condemned. The bailiff's call interrupted further discussion. As they filed back into the courtroom, Michael noticed Reed engaged in intense whispered conversation with her attorney, her expression suggesting the proceedings weren't following her anticipated script. Judge Preston resumed her position, surveying the assembled parties with the measured gaze of someone who had witnessed humanity at both its noblest and its most petty. "Before rendering my decision," she began, "I have one additional question for Ms. Reed." Reed straightened, clearly surprised at being directly addressed. "Yes, Your Honor." Your concerns about Emma's welfare appear sincere on their face. However, given your professional history with Officer Days, I must ask directly, do you have any personal motivations influencing your exceptional interest in this particular case? The question hung in the air like frost crystals, delicate yet sharp. Reed's composure faltered momentarily, her rehearsed professional demeanor cracking to reveal something harder beneath. "My only motivation is the child's welfare, Your Honor," she responded, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Any past professional disagreements with Officer Hayes are irrelevant to the present circumstances." Judge Preston studied Reed with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades discerning truth from testimony. "I see. Thank you for that clarification." She turned her attention to the entire court. "Having reviewed the evidence and testimony presented, I am prepared to issue a temporary ruling pending further evaluation." Emma reached for Michael's hand, her small fingers cold with tension. Alpha pressed closer to her legs, sensing her anxiety. "First," Judge Preston began, "I find Daniel Hayes's legal directives regarding his daughter's guardianship to be valid and properly executed. Martha Wilson is hereby recognized as Emma Hayes's legal guardian, with Michael Sullivan appointed as co-assistant guardian given Mrs. Wilson's current physical limitations." Reed shifted in her seat, her attorney already scribbling notes for a potential appeal. "Second," the judge continued, "the service animal certifications for all 5 German Shepherds are legally binding. These animals are not to be removed from their service duties without proper evaluation by qualified canine training personnel from the state police, not local animal control." She paused, looking directly at Emma. "However, given the destruction of the Hayes family home and Mrs. Wilson's current housing limitations, appropriate accommodations must be secured within 30 days that can properly house both Emma and the service animals. Failure to secure such accommodations may necessitate temporary alternative arrangements for some or all of the animals." Emma's face fell slightly at this last condition, but Michael squeezed her hand reassuringly. They had anticipated this requirement and already begun exploring options. "This court will reconvene in 30 days for a permanent custody determination," Judge Preston concluded. "Until then, the temporary guardianship arrangement will remain in effect, and all 5 service animals will remain in Emma's care, provided they continue to demonstrate appropriate behavior and proper control." The gavel struck with finality, its sharp report echoing through the hushed courtroom. Reed immediately huddled with her legal team, their expressions suggesting the battle would continue. But for now, victory belonged to Emma and her unusual family. Outside the courthouse, snow had begun falling again, gentle flakes drifting lazily from pearl gray skies. Emma stood on the steps between Michael and Martha, Alpha at attention beside her, watching the hypnotic descent of countless frozen stars. "Does this mean I get to keep all my dogs?" she asked, her voice small against the vastness of winter. "Yes," Jennifer answered, kneeling to Emma's level, despite her professional skirt suit. The judge recognized they're not just pets. They're service animals with special training and special rights. Most importantly, she recognized they're your family. Emma considered this answer with characteristic seriousness. "But we need a bigger house than Mrs. Martha's." "We'll find one," Michael assured her. "Maybe not exactly like your old house, but somewhere with enough space for everyone." Martha smiled, adjusting her weight on her cane. I've already spoken with Reverend Thomas. The old parsonage behind the church has been sitting empty since they built the new one. 5 bedrooms, fenced yard, and the church council is willing to rent it to us for a nominal amount, given the circumstances. Michael looked at her in surprise. You've been busy. I've lived in this town 78 years, Martha replied with a wink. I know where all the empty houses are and who holds the keys. The drive back to Martha's house felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of uncertainty had lifted from their shoulders. Emma sat between Michael and Jennifer in the back seat of Cooper's patrol car, Alpha once again accompanying them while Dr. Jenkins remained with the other dogs. Thank you for coming, Michael said quietly to Jennifer as Emma dozed against his shoulder, exhausted by the emotional morning. Your legal expertise made all the difference. Jennifer's expression softened as she watched her father with the sleeping child. When you called, I was surprised. The Michael Sullivan I grew up with chased stories across war zones, not custody battles in small towns. People change, he offered simply. They can, Jennifer acknowledged, if they choose to. She hesitated, then added, Mom would be proud of you today. The words penetrated places within Michael that had remained frozen for years, bringing unexpected warmth. I should have been there more for both of you. Yes, Jennifer agreed without rancor. But you're here now for someone who needs you. That counts for something. At Martha's house, they found Dr. Jenkins sitting calmly on the porch, the remaining 4 shepherds arranged around her in a protective formation that mirrored how they positioned themselves with Emma. They've been perfect gentlemen, she reported as they approached, though they perked up every time a car passed, hoping it was you returning. The reunion between Emma and her guardians unfolded with restrained joy. No frantic barking or chaotic movement, simply 4 powerful animals converging on the small girl with dignified delight, each waiting its turn for acknowledgement. Emma greeted each by name, her small hands touching ears, muzzles, and shoulders in what appeared to be a ritual of reconnection. What happened? Dr. Jenkins asked quietly as the others entered the house. Michael summarized the court decision, including the 30-day window to secure appropriate housing. Martha says the old parsonage might be our solution. Jenkins nodded approvingly. Good location. Close to school when Emma starts attending again. Plenty of yard space for the dogs. And the church community would provide additional support. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. The parsonage required cleaning and minor repairs after standing vacant for months. The church community rallied around the unusual family, organizing volunteer workdays to prepare the house. Men arrived with tools and lumber to reinforce fences and build proper kennels in the backyard. Women brought furniture, household supplies, and home-cooked meals. Michael observed this outpouring of support with journalist objectivity, gradually giving way to personal involvement. These people had known Daniel Hayes, had respected him as both officer and neighbor. Now they extended that respect to his daughter and her guardians, both human and canine. 27 days after the court hearing, Emma Hayes stood in the center of her new bedroom in the parsonage, surrounded by a curious mix of salvaged treasures from her old home and donations from the community. Michael watched from the doorway as she carefully arranged 5 framed photographs on her dresser. Each showed her father with one of the shepherds, moments of connection captured in time. Is it starting to feel like home? He asked gently. Emma considered the question with her usual thoughtfulness. Dad said home isn't really a place. It's people who keep you safe and make you feel like you belong. Wise man, your father. She nodded, adjusting the final photograph. He would like this house, especially the big yard for training. Michael entered the room, sitting on the edge of the neatly made bed. Emma, there's something I'd like to discuss with you about the future. She turned to face him, her expression suddenly guarded. Are you leaving? The question caught him unprepared, the fear behind it even more so. No, the opposite actually. I was hoping to stay permanently, if that's all right with you. Emma's posture relaxed slightly. As my guardian with Mrs. Martha? Yes, but more than that. Michael chose his words carefully. I've been thinking about what happens after the 30-day evaluation. Judge Preston will make her final ruling, and I believe she'll confirm Martha and me as your permanent guardians. And the dogs get to stay too, Emma added firmly. And the dogs stay too, Michael confirmed with a smile. But I was thinking about my work. I've been a journalist for many years, traveling to different places, writing stories about people in faraway countries. Important stories, Emma said, revealing she had researched him online or perhaps heard adults discussing his career. Some were important, he acknowledged, but I've realized there are important stories right here too. And more importantly, there are people right here who matter to me now. Understanding dawned in Emma's eyes. You want to stay in Oakridge? I do. The certainty in his voice surprised even him. I've spoken with the local newspaper. They need an editor, someone to oversee local reporting and occasionally write features. The pay is less than what I made before, but it's enough, and I'd be home every night. With us, Emma said softly. With you, Michael confirmed, if that's what you want. Emma stepped forward, wrapping small arms around his neck in a rare display of physical affection. That's what I want, she whispered against his shoulder. The following week, they returned to the courthouse for the final hearing. This time, all 5 shepherds accompanied them, each impeccably groomed and displaying perfect behavior that silenced any remaining doubts about Emma's ability to control them. Christine Reed appeared with a smaller legal team, her aggressive pursuit having diminished after multiple community members came forward with stories of Hayes' heroism and Emma's extraordinary bond with his service animals. Judge Preston reviewed the documentation of the parsonage arrangements, Martha and Michael's permanent guardianship plan, and the continued excellent behavior of the shepherds. Her final ruling confirmed what their hearts already knew. Emma would remain with Martha and Michael as her legal guardians. All 5 service animals would stay with her, officially retired from police duty, but continuing their most important mission, protecting Daniel Hayes' greatest legacy. Outside the courthouse, snow fell once more. Spring still weeks away in this northern climate, but Emma's face held the warmth of summer as she knelt beside her canine guardians, whispering words of celebration that only they could hear. Ready to go home? Michael asked, extending his hand. Emma nodded, taking his offered hand and rising to her feet. Home, she repeated, the word carrying new meaning for both of them. Martha watched from a few steps away, leaning less heavily on her cane as her injury continued healing. Beside her stood Jennifer, who had returned for the final hearing and would stay the weekend before returning to Boston. You've built something beautiful here, Jennifer told her father as they walked toward their cars, something Mom would have loved to see. Michael glanced ahead where Emma walked between Alpha and Shadow, her small figure dwarfed by the massive animals, yet somehow appearing perfectly at home in their protective presence. I spent years documenting what humans destroy, he said quietly. Maybe it's time to document what we can build instead. As they drove through town toward the parsonage, Michael glimpsed their reflection in shop windows. An elderly woman with dignity etched into every line of her face. A middle-aged man finding purpose beyond ambition. A child with wisdom beyond her years. 5 extraordinary animals continuing their sworn duty. Family, not of blood but of choice. Guardians of different species united by a common purpose. Protectors finding healing in the very act of protection. In that moment, Michael Sullivan understood what Daniel Hayes had known all along. The most important stories aren't found in distant conflicts or global crises. They live in ordinary moments of extraordinary courage, in promises kept despite impossible odds, in the quiet heroism of simply being there for those who need you most. The most important stories are written not in headlines, but in hearts. And sometimes they're guarded by 5 loyal shepherds and the remarkable child they call their own.